Do you believe that everything was said in the official announcement of the Pope's death? What if I told you that part of the story was hidden, that behind the golden curtains of the Vatican, there is something that they don't want you to know? April 21st, 2025, went down in history as the moment when the Vatican announced to the world the death of Pope Francis. But was that really it? A Santa Bee, so meticulous with every word, issued a cold, formal, almost impersonal official note. No details about the pontiff's last hours, no visual record, no convincing explanation. A silence, deafening. Why so much mystery surrounding the death of the most powerful man in the Church? What is hidden behind the walls of Vatican's secret library? There is something we hidden files that justifies this dark behavior. The Vatican is known for keeping ancient secrets, banned books, documents that never came to light, gospels that were excluded from the Bible. And now, with the departure of a pope who divided opinions, the silent power play starts to move. Many scholars and conspiracy theorists claim that the death of a pontiff, it's rarely just a health issue. There is a symbolism, a break, a new phase, and often, secrets are buried with him. But the question that echoes around the world is not just, why did he die? But yes, what will be revealed now that he is gone? There are those who say that documents personally locked by Francisco could be opened in the coming days. Others claim that prophetic letters were written but never delivered. The Church, once again, finds itself facing a veil of mystery, and perhaps of a revelation that could shake the foundations of the Christian faith. And that's exactly when everything starts to get even more disturbing. In the silent corridors of the Vatican, rumors are gaining strength. Internal sources, kept anonymous, suggest that Pope Francis no longer appeared frequently because he would be involved in extremely delicate decisions. Some linked to secret documents, others to internal reforms that faced strong resistance. His absence during part of Holy Week, one of the Church's most important celebrations, did not go unnoticed, and when he finally appeared, his presence seemed distant. The tired look, the hurried speech, the heavy atmosphere around. Did he know what was coming? Or worse, were they already preparing the ground for their final silence? The most disturbing thing about all this is the feeling that we're just scratching the surface. The story the Vatican told the world is brief, controlled, cold, but what's being whispered behind the scenes is hot, controversial, and could change forever the way we understand not just the end of a papacy, but also what comes after. And in this symbolic moment, where the world says goodbye to a spiritual leader, it is impossible not to feel the weight of mystery and responsibility. Therefore, I want to make a special request to you. Leave your prayer in the comments. Yes, write a sentence of faith, a message of light, a word of peace. Let's transform this community into a space for reflection and spiritual connection. Whether you are religious or just curious, all positive energy matters. Let's pray together, not just for Pope Francis, but for all that is about to be revealed. And if you want to continue following this journey through Vatican secrets, prohibited manuscripts, hidden conspiracies and prophecies, leave a like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. This goes a long way in spreading this message and keeping this investigation alive. Because what comes next could change everything. Why has the Pope stopped appearing in public in recent weeks? Could something bigger be going on behind the scenes? This is the question that does not want to be silenced. And not just among the faithful, but among scholars, journalists, theologians, and even the most skeptical investigators of the occult. Pope Francis's sudden and increasingly notable absence from official Vatican events, especially during Holy Week, has generated visible discomfort. We are talking about one of the most important celebrations in the Catholic calendar, where traditionally the pontiff leads masses, gives speeches, appears for public blessings. But this time, silence was the protagonist. The ceremonies continued without him. And when he finally appeared on Easter Sunday, his speech was quick, without the usual strength, without that sparkle in his eyes. It was like he was there, and at the same time, he wasn't. The Vatican, as always, did not provide concrete explanations. They claimed tiredness, health issues, something routine for an 88-year-old man. But was that all? Or was something much deeper and darker being carefully covered up? We cannot forget that this is the same Vatican that has kept For centuries, prohibited texts, unrevealed prophecies, documents that have never been shown to the public. When silence becomes the default, it is because the secrecy has gone beyond its limits. And the truth is that for those who closely follow the Vatican secrets, this absence was not just a sign of fragile health, she was a standard. In recent months, Francisco had already been reducing his appearances. Statements that previously caused global commotion began to be issued by advisors. He no longer walked the corridors, did not receive representatives, did not speak at public ceremonies as before. And all of this happened, gradually, almost imperceptibly. But now, with his death announced, everything starts to make sense. Or perhaps to show that something much bigger was being orchestrated behind the scenes of power and faith. We are not just talking about the natural end of a papal cycle. We are talking about a possible internal movement, of decisions that perhaps were made without the world's knowledge, of documents that may have been sealed, of truths that may never come to light. How many times in the history of the Catholic Church have we seen pontiffs silently removed, discredited from within, just to keep a narrative intact to the outside world? And how many times did it involve secret files, internal political pressures, conflicts between factions within the Vatican itself? History has already shown us that the Vatican is a master at manipulating the narrative and also at protecting what it considers too sacred for the public eye. With the Pope's health failing, who was really making the decisions? Who was controlling what should or should not be said to the press? And most importantly, what kind of documents, letters, prophetic writings, or internal decrees were drafted, archived, and kept from the eyes of the world, while his figure slowly faded from the spotlight? Some rumors indicate that the Pope left sealed instructions. Others say there were secret meetings between conservative cardinals who were pushing for a return to stricter doctrine, far from the reforms that Francis promoted. There are those who claim that even hidden manuscripts linked to ancient end-time prophecies were revised during his last days of life. All of this, according to unofficial sources, happening in absolute secrecy, away from the cameras, away from St. Peter's Square. Now think with me, why this level of secrecy? Why was absence handled so carefully? What did the Pope know, or was about to reveal, that would require so much control of information? When we look at the broader context of his papacy, we see that he always walked a tightrope between progressivism and tradition. He tried to open dialogues but met fierce resistance. He spoke about inclusion but faced closed doors within the institution he led. He tried to give a voice to the invisible, but power in the Vatican rarely forgives dissonant voices. And in this game of forces, what happens when the leader starts to become fragile? When your health no longer guarantees control, the Vatican goes into containment mode. The structure closes, and that's when the secrets go back into hiding, or prepare to emerge. That is why the Pope's absence in recent weeks, it cannot be seen as a detail. It's a clue. It is a crack in the solid facade of the Vatican. It's a warning that perhaps we were about to discover something we were never supposed to know, something that was stored in the underground archives of the secret library, far from the world, for centuries. And perhaps it resurfaced in the last moments of Francisco's life. Now, I want to hear from you who are watching this far. Do you believe that this absence was just a health issue, or is there something much bigger behind it? Write the sentence here in the comments, "I see what they hide." If you feel there is something wrong with this story, if you believe that the Vatican is holding more than we can imagine, comment, "Secrets don't die with popes." And if you, like me, feel like we're just beginning to understand what's behind this story, write, "I continue to seek the truth." What if I told you that the Pope's death was already predicted in ancient prophecies, hidden until today by the Vatican? This sounds like something out of a movie, a conspiracy theory. But what if it's true? What if, behind the walls of the world's most guarded city-state, lie documents, apocryphal texts, ancient manuscripts and prophecies that not only predicted Francis's arrival, but also marked the end of his journey as a key point in something much bigger, much darker, and frightening? It is not new that we talk about prophecies within the universe of faith. And when the subject is the Vatican, things take on an even more mysterious proportion. Many believe that the list of popes of St. Malachi, for example, is one of the most disturbing documents in the history of the Church. Supposedly written in the 12th century, this ancient prophecy accurately lists 112 popes, each with a symbolic description. And you know what's even more disturbing? According to this list, Pope Francis would be last, the last one. The man described as Peter the Roman, who will guide the people through great tribulations, and at the end of his papacy, the destruction of the city of the Seven Hills would come. A clear reference to Rome, the heart of the Vatican. Coincidence? Or is there something bigger behind this narrative? Something that the Vatican itself has always known and done everything it could to keep secret. Let's go further. In the book of Revelation, we find passages that talk about the emergence of false prophets, the collapse of religious structures, the end of a spiritual era. Many scholars have already pointed out symbolic similarities between these writings and certain recent events within the Church. Covered scandals, internal tensions, withdrawal from the public, and now, the sudden and mysterious death of a pope who touched the heart of the institution. Are we really facing a simple human loss? Or does Francis's end mark the beginning of something deeper, like a new spiritual era, a great revelation, or even the beginning of the end? The Vatican has always treated these prophecies with silence, a silence that echoes in the corridors of the Vatican secret library, where documents over 1,000 years old rest, hidden from everyone, away from the public eye. There, among texts in Latin, Greek, and forgotten languages, many believe that truths are locked away that would completely change everything we know about faith, the Church, and the very destiny of humanity. And there are many former researchers, historians, and even religious people who say there have already been attempts to disseminate these truths, and whoever tried was silenced. Francis has always demonstrated an interest in opening the Church to dialogue. He talked about transparency, about walking alongside the people, about breaking with old paradigms. But did he get too close than he shouldn't have? Did he want, in his last days, to reveal something that could not be revealed? The Vatican's time and silence tell us a lot, and at the same time, they say nothing. But the simple fact that these prophecies exist, that they fit almost exactly into the timeline we live in now, is reason enough to keep us alert. There are those who say that the descriptions of Malachi's prophecy are vague, symbolic, open to interpretation. But why then has the Vatican never officially denied its authenticity? Why did you never categorically deny this document? Why do you maintain such absolute silence in the face of something that could be denied with a simple statement? Of course, not everything can be proven. After all, we are dealing with the intangible, the spiritual, the symbolic. But we are also dealing with a pattern of omission, with the history of an institution that, over the centuries, already burned books, banned ideas, persecuted scientists, and hid knowledge in the name of order and faith. What if Francisco's death was the trigger for something bigger? What if from now on, documents, letters, or even messages left by him begin to emerge? Messages that perhaps would never have been read in his lifetime, but that may now come to light. Imagine if one of these letters was locked in some safe hidden in the basement of the Apostolic Library. Imagine if in it, he revealed everything he knew, the truths about apocryphal gospels until end times prophecies, hidden for centuries to avoid chaos. Imagine if he tried to leave an alert, or a guide, or simply the truth. It's hard to believe this is all just a coincidence. The man dies, the prophecy is fulfilled, silence reigns, and the faith of the world comes into question. All of this happening at the same time, and the Church, once again, locked behind walls, with its eyes looking inward, not outward, waiting, observing, controlling. And right now, as you watch this video, ask yourself, what else could be hidden? What if the prophecies are just the tip of the iceberg? What if the next revelation is closer than we think? If you've come this far, it's because you feel something is wrong, that this story is not over yet, that what seems like an end, maybe it's just the beginning. Do you know what really happens when a pope dies? What if I tell you that an invisible, silent, and deeply strategic internal war begins, fought in the shadows by the most powerful men in the Church? Many imagine that when a pontiff dies, the Vatican, enters into a sacred, calm, and respectful mourning. But reality, although shrouded in religious rituals and symbols, is much more intense, more political, and in certain aspects, even dark. When the Pope dies, time stops. Tradition calls this period sede vacante, and at this time, St. Peter's throne is empty. But power, it doesn't stay still. This is where a little-known but extremely important figure comes into play, the Camerlengo. The name may seem strange to those who are not familiar with the behind-the-scenes of the Vatican, but its function is absolutely vital. He becomes, in practice, the most powerful man in the Catholic world, albeit temporarily. It is up to him not only to organize all the rites related to the Pope's death, but also to control the financial resources, supervise the Vatican, seal the papal apartments, and most importantly, ensure that no compromising information is leaked during this sensitive period. After all, it is in this interval that many secrets can escape. And when we talk about the Vatican, every hidden detail can carry centuries of forbidden revelations. While the Camerlengo acts with apparent serenity, something much more complex and dangerous begins to unfold behind the scenes. The formation of the conclave. Yes, that image you may have seen, of cardinals gathered in the Sistine Chapel, looks serene, almost heavenly. But behind those red robes, there are power struggles, political pressures, exchanges of influence, secret alliances and, according to many former members of the Curia who spoke anonymously, promises made under hidden oaths. Choosing the next pope is not just a matter of faith. It's a strategic move. It is deciding the direction of billions of believers around the world. It is deciding whether the church will be more open or more closed, more transparent or more secret, more focused on the people or more protected in its ivory towers. And the most disturbing thing, has the successor already been chosen even before Francisco's death? Could it be that there is a hidden group, a silent wing within the Vatican that was already preparing the transition, perhaps even accelerating this moment? Does it seem extreme? Be aware that there are historical records of similar disputes. Popes who died under mysterious circumstances, conclaves that lasted months due to internal fights, missing documents, votes exchanged under pressure. The Vatican is a stage where spirituality meets the deepest politics you can imagine. And what is at stake now is not just the name of the next pope. It's control of the narrative. It is the domain over the files. It is the destiny of hidden texts of the Bible, the forgotten prophecies, the secret letters between pontiffs, stored for decades in the impenetrable silence of the apostolic archives. With the death of Francis, the eyes of the world turn to Rome. But what the world doesn't see are the conversations in the dim light, the vows being stitched together in the subterranean corridors of faith, the manuscripts being hastily reviewed by those who have access to what we mere mortals could never touch. There are those who say that the next pope already has a clear mission, to control the flow of revelations. Others believe he will come with orders to release documents, perhaps even admitting truths previously considered taboo. It will be, or will all of this be kept once again under the ancient structure of secrecy that characterizes the Holy See? An important and little publicized detail. Before the conclave officially begins, all the gathered cardinals take an oath of absolute silence. No one can talk about the behind the scenes of the vote. No information can be leaked. And if it gets out, the punishments are severe. This makes us wonder, what is so serious, so impactful, so transformative being discussed between them that needs to be protected so rigorously? Could it be that among the documents to be considered before choosing the new pope are also prophecies, old visions, letters left by Francisco, perhaps warning of possible infiltration or recommending names? Everything is possible when the setting is the Vatican. And now, with a new conclave approaching, the question that echoes is, who will be chosen? Who will be the man capable of taking on the leadership of a church in crisis, surrounded by old scandals that have not yet been resolved, pressured by social demands, questioned by increasingly skeptical believers? And will this new pope have the courage or authorization to open the archives, to release the forbidden texts, to tell the world the truth about the apocryphal Gospels, about the books that were excluded from the Bible, about the hidden prophecies who talk about the end of times? At this point, everything is speculation. But if you follow this channel, you already know that where there is smoke, there is fire. And when we talk about the behind the scenes of the Vatican, the fire burns in silence, in stone corridors, and in underground libraries. And while cardinals pray publicly, many others whisper in secret, deciding the future of faith, information, and revelation. The world watches the white smoke that will come out of the Sistine Chapel, but few know what really burns inside her. Now that you've come this far, it's your turn to join me on this journey. I want to make you an important invitation. Write in the comments, "The secret is being passed on," if you believe there is a hidden transition of power within the Vatican. If you feel like something big is about to happen with the election of the next pope, comment, "The succession has begun." And if you, like me, want to continue investigating every step, every whisper, every clue as to what might be hidden between the lines of this conclave, type, "I watch the smoke." The Vatican was silent for decades, a silence that is not just religious, contemplative, or sacred. It is a heavy silence, carefully constructed, cultivated with rituals, surrounded by protocols and maintained by men sworn to protect secrets, even if to do so, they needed to hide the truth from humanity. But now, with the death of Pope Francis, something seems about to break this invisible barrier. It is as if pressure has been building up for years, and the end of his pontificate is the trigger that could open the doors to files never before revealed. And here comes a delicate but urgent question. What exactly does the Vatican keep that needs to be kept away from our eyes? Documents locked in fortified rooms, sealed manuscripts, letters written by the Pope in his own hand and addressed to a few trusted names. Letters that, according to unofficial sources linked to the Roman Curia, contain guidance on very delicate topics: apocryphal gospels, the true origin of certain biblical passages, secret agreements between the church and civil powers, relics never exposed, and even reports of supernatural experiences that would have been recorded by previous popes and kept under absolute secrecy. Francisco, although seen by many as a reformer, knew how far he could go. There is an invisible line in the Vatican that not even the Pope crosses, and now that he is broken, that line can be broken. During his pontificate, Francis would have had access to archives that not all popes dared to consult. And this is not theory. Historians such as Giovanni Maria Vian and theologians close to the pontiff confirm that he always showed interest in the so-called sensitive documents of the Vatican Apostolic Library, those that deal with topics considered too dangerous to be publicized, topics that question centuries-old interpretations of doctrine that suggest other views on the figure of Jesus, and that could, if they came to light, completely change the relationship of believers with institutionalized faith. We're not just talking about historical curiosities. We are talking about documents that deal, for example, with Mary Magdalene as possible wife of Christ, do Gospel of Thomas, which portrays teachings completely different from the canonical Gospels in accounts of Jesus' bloodline, and of books that describe the presence of fallen angels living among men. There are even constant mentions of a supposed manuscript that would contain a detailed vision of what would come after the last pope of Malachi's prophecy. This document, if it actually exists, has never been officially mentioned. But there are indirect records in the library's internal catalogues, dating back to the 17th century, which indicate the existence of a text classified as non-disclosure, not disseminable. With Francisco's death, this silent balance could be broken. The access keys to these restricted compartments, previously in the direct custody of the Pope, now need to be redistributed. And this creates vulnerability. Who will have the courage to open these files? And if they do, who will decide what can or cannot be revealed to the world? That's where the risk and opportunity come in. Risk for the traditional structure of the Church, which could be shaken by new truths. Opportunity for the world, which perhaps, for the first time, can see beyond the dense curtain that covers the deepest secrets of Christianity. It's important to remember that not everything is on paper. There are also video records, recordings of internal sessions, records of exorcisms that were never made public, and even testimonies from former members of the Curia who died in suspicious circumstances after threatening to say too much. These contents are part of the so-called Black Archive, an unofficial, uncatalogued section, but whose existence is constantly whispered in the corridors of scholars and independent researchers. Did Francisco know about the existence of these materials? Had he initiated a plan for his gradual release? Or could it be that, knowing the risks, you preferred to leave them locked up until a time when you were no longer with us? What is known is that some of these documents were reclassified in the last year of his pontificate. This is public, and whenever this happens within the Vatican structure, it is a sign of movement. Reclassifying is preparing for something, either to protect even more rigorously or to facilitate a future release. And now, with the vacant headquarters officially established, these movements should gain strength. The new leadership will have access to everything he left behind, including your secrets. And if there are indeed handwritten letters with instructions on what to do after his death, this could be the most critical moment in the Vatican's recent history. Just imagine, the new pope takes office, opens a letter written by Francis, and in it, you find a list of documents that should be revealed. Or worse, a warning. A warning that there is something within the walls of the Holy See that needs to be protected at all costs. Something that, if it comes to light, could cause a rupture. A split between spiritual faith and institutional faith. Something that can divide the Church, call its foundations into question, and at the same time, free consciences. Some called him the Pope of Compassion. Others, with a more accusatory and even bitter tone, labeled him the destroyer of tradition. But in the end, who was Francis really? This is the question that reverberates among the corridors of faith and the dark halls where the power of the Church has always been consolidated. Was he a visionary man, driven by the urgency to reconnect the Church with the common people? Or was he, as some of his opponents accused him, a dangerous reformer who dared to challenge the immutable pillars of Catholic doctrine, putting centuries of carefully protected tradition at risk? During his pontificate, Pope Francis was undoubtedly a divisive figure. For many, he was the only pope in centuries who had the courage to look inside the Vatican structure and point out the cracks, the excesses, the complicit silences, and the mistakes never admitted. He opened doors that had been locked for centuries and brought to light subjects that seemed taboo within the Church. Among the most explosive themes is his openly more welcoming stance towards the LGBTQIA+ community. While part of the clergy and a large part of the conservative wing saw this as a direct attack on tradition, Francis spoke of welcoming, empathy, and inclusion, stating that, "Who am I to judge a brother who seeks God?" This phrase, said in an informal interview, resonated around the world and caused shockwaves within the walls of the Vatican. And this is just one of the examples. He also promoted debates about the possibility of ordaining married men in regions with a shortage of priests, something considered unacceptable for centuries. It encouraged a deep reflection on the role of women in the Church, advocating that they have more space, including in decisive instances of the clerical structure, something that deeply disturbed the oldest cardinals and the most orthodox sectors. But perhaps the most intense confrontation was the one waged against the historical dogmas. Francis never openly tampered with dogmas. That would cause an institutional earthquake. But he pressed its edges. He questioned, interpreted in a more open, more human way. He said the Church needed to stop condemning and start listening. And that, to many within the top brass, sounded like an existential threat. After all, if dogmas are questioned today, what else can be called into question tomorrow? There were many times when Francis faced public criticism from cardinals. Some even published openly critical documents, such as the famous letter from the 4 cardinals, in which they asked for clarification on the apostolic exhortation, the joy of love, as they considered that it opened space for interpretations contrary to the doctrine on the family and the sacraments. Others, behind the scenes, organized silent resistance, blocking projects, hindering appointments, creating internal divisions within the Roman Curia. The conservative wing, linked to former popes and bishops of global influence, saw Francis as a risk and at times an enemy. But therein lies the irony of his figure. Even though he was pope, even though he had the highest authority in the Church, Francis often seemed isolated, one man against an ancient structure. He talked about the poor, about immigrants, about caring for the planet, about religious hypocrisy. He had popular charisma, but faced resistance within the Vatican itself. Many said that, instead of guiding the Church, he was weakening its foundations. For the most traditionalists, he was almost a silent heretic, someone who smiled at the world, but was, according to them, slowly dissolving Catholic identity. And this internal conflict grew, and with it, the silence around the Pope also grew. He started to appear less. Some proposals were left aside. Strategic appointments were blocked. Entire speeches appeared to have been filtered before being released. Even in his public appearances, it was possible to notice a change. The Francisco of his early years, energetic and incisive, now seemed more measured, as if he had realized that tampering with certain Vatican structures wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. And now that he's gone, that tension remains in the air, because what he tried to do and what he failed to do remains echoing. His writings, his speeches, his decisions are still there, and among them, possibly, are codes, veiled messages, instructions on what could or should happen after your departure. This is why so many people ask themselves, was he really a pope who modernized the faith, or a reformer who tried to go too far? Will the next pope continue his vision, or will he bury it, along with the documents and ideas that Francis left behind? And you, who are watching now, what do you think about this? If you believe that Francisco was a man ahead of his time, write here in the comments, the Pope of Truth. But if you think he faced forces greater than he could withstand, comment, he knew too much. And if you feel like we're about to discover something much bigger about his mission, his death, and what he left hidden, enter Francisco left clues. This helps me understand what you think, increases our engagement, and strengthens this community of inquiry and revelation. Because what comes next goes even deeper. What if I told you that there is a last message written by the Pope himself that has never been read in public? I'm not talking about just any note, an unfinished sermon, or a simple spiritual testament. I'm talking about something much deeper, more direct, more urgent. A document that, according to internal rumors within the Curia itself, was written by Francis in the last months of his life. A personal letter, hand-sealed, locked in an internal Vatican safe with clear orders that it should be opened only after his death. And that's when everything starts to take on an even darker tone. Because until now, officially, this letter has not been revealed. No public mention, no leaks, no confirmation, just silence. And silence, when it comes from the Vatican, almost always carries more secrets than 1,000 words. Sources close to the papal circle, people who prefer to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation, claim that the content of this letter may contain revelations about the future of the Catholic Church, guidelines on the decisions that should be taken in the transition period, and even warnings about prophetic events which were to come, and which, in some way, the Pope would have become aware of. There are those who say that he had access to documents from other popes, confidential writings archived in special sections of the Apostolic Library, and that, impacted by what he read, he decided to write his own final letter, not to defend yourself, not to justify his papacy, but to leave a kind of hidden legacy, a warning, a warning. The fact that this supposed letter is shrouded in mystery only reinforces the idea that its content is highly sensitive, perhaps too dangerous to be made public immediately. Perhaps it contains behind-the-scenes information about the conclave. Perhaps it will reveal the names of people he trusted or distrusted. Perhaps he talks about documents that he knew were being hidden, and that should be released. Perhaps it also indicates the existence of secret files that are not included in official records, texts that talk about apocryphal books, end-time prophecies, or even spiritual discoveries that never reach the surface. What is most intriguing is the absolute silence around the subject. No statement, no attempt to deny the existence of the letter. This, within the Holy See's communication pattern, is usually a clear indication. When they don't deny it's because they don't want to open up space for more questions. And if they don't want questions, it's because the answers may be more shocking than the world is prepared to hear. Remember, The Vatican has dealt with similar situations before. In other pontificates, personal letters and diaries were found years later, hidden, censored, kept in parallel archives. Texts that contradicted official decisions or revealed plans that were interrupted by internal pressure. What makes this situation unique is that Francisco was a man who understood how the system worked. He knew the internal structure of the Vatican, the power plays, the invisible forces that move beneath the red robes of the cardinal. He knew his decisions could be reversed, stifled, rewritten. Therefore, writing this letter, if it really exists, would have been his way of preserving something that perhaps could never be said in public. A last gesture of resistance, a silent act of courage. What if the document is finally revealed? What could it contain that justifies so much caution? And if it is read, who will have the courage to give voice to the words of a pope who has already passed away, but who perhaps left instructions that could reopen wounds, challenge structures, and divide opinions? Will the new pope agree to make this public? Or will he do what so many others have done before him? Guard, silence, hide. That's what makes this possible letter so symbolic. Because, more than a document, it represents a link between what was and what can still be, between the figure of Francis and the future of the Church, between what was said and what was silenced, between what we believe we know and what we were never told. If you've stayed with me this far, it's because you feel like something big is behind all of this, and that already puts you among the few who really seek the truth beyond appearances. So, before leaving, do the following. Subscribe to the channel right now, because what is yet to come in the next videos will surprise you even more. Here, we go deep, where most are afraid to look. If you made it to the end, I want to see your brand in the comments. Right there. I made it to the end because I need to know the truth. This type of comment shows that you are part of this group that does not accept the official version without question. And yes, leave your like, because this really helps this video reach more people who, like you, also feel that there is something hidden behind the Vatican curtain. And now, it doesn't stop here. Click on the next video that is already appearing here on the screen, because in it, I will reveal what the Vatican's secret archives say about a forgotten prophecy, and what could be about to happen to the whole world. I'll wait for you.